Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the audience in-house and those joining us live on the US Consulate Chennai Facebook page. Warm welcome to this afternoon session on letters of recommendation. We will talk about why the LOR is such an important component of the US University application process. If you have any questions that you would like to ask us for the online audience, please do type those questions in the comment section of the Facebook page, and we will take your questions at the end of the session. For those of you who are in the audience, feel free to disturb if required in the middle of the session or at the end of the session. I would be happy to take your questions. So, I will start with a brief introduction to our organization and then we will go into the presentation. US India Education Foundation is a binational organization that was established following the signing of a treaty between the Government of India and the Government of the United States. The purpose of setting up this organization was to promote mutual exchange between the citizens of two countries in the area of education and cultural exchange, and we administer two programs. The first one is the Fulbright and the Fulbright Nehru Fellowship programs, and the second one is the EducationUSA program. To give you a little more information about the EducationUSA program, we are funded by the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, and this comes under the US Department of State. We are a global network of 400 plus advising centers in 170 countries. And in India, we have 7 EducationUSA centers. 5 of these come under the umbrella of the US IEF office, and these are in the cities of Delhi, Kolkata, Mumbai, Hyderabad and Chennai. And we have 2 independent EducationUSA centers that work out of the offices of trusts in those 2 cities, and these are in the cities of Ahmedabad and Bengaluru. So, with that brief introduction to our organization, let us go into our presentation on the letters of recommendation. So, what is an LOR? I am sorry, there seems to be some mishap on the left over there with the screen, but just to go into what is an LOR, right? It is a letter that is provided by a school teacher, a high school teacher or a professor at your college or university to a US university. They send it to a US university. Basically, it's like a recommendation about whether you will make a good student at the US university or not, whether you will fit into their program or not. So, it will of course speak about your academic and intellectual abilities essentially, right. It will talk about whether you will be able to succeed academically at the university. It will also perhaps add certain other details about your personality and characteristic. Why is it useful? Because it will help the admissions committee at a US university gauge, your marks are definitely something that will speak for your academic ability, but there is more to you than just your marks, and to get a picture of who you truly are, these recommendation letters will really help the admissions committee. Now, it will also talk about things like whether you can work in a team, whether you are responsible, you can take responsibilities or not. And let us say for example, there are 2 students whose application is being reviewed by the admissions committee and both of you are academically very similar. Who should they choose between you? Suppose your GPA is very similar and your GRE or SAT or ACT score is very similar. Let us say your English language proficiency is also very similar. So, how should they really decide whether student A from India or student B from India should be given the opportunity to be selected? So, they need to look at certain other factors of your application as well. So, as I said, the University Admissions Committee will look at your overall profile, and as part of that overall profile, the letter of recommendation will play a big role in helping them make their decision between 2 very similarly academically inclined students. Okay. It does provide additional information about you which is not there in your application or which cannot be really stated qualitatively in your application. Now, your admission decisions are impacted by your letter of recommendation. So, I do hope you all have great relationships with your teachers and professors who are going to be writing these letters of recommendation, right. And a great LOR may not necessarily guarantee admission, but a weak letter of recommendation can scuttle your application completely, your admission chances completely, all right. So, it does provide the LOR helps to provide a complete picture to who the student really is. All right. So, who should you be getting this LOR from? All right. So, if you are a high school student, you will get one, you will have to submit is a counselor recommendation and you will have to submit 2 teacher recommendations. So, the 2 teachers should be ideally subject teachers who are teaching you a course, a subject somewhat similar to the program that you hope to pursue in the US. So, let us say if you are going for an engineering program, then choose your math, physics or chemistry teachers to give you those letters of recommendation. But if you are going for a humanities program or a literature program, then get it from your humanities or literature teachers. That would make more sense. It is not necessary that the teacher recommendation has to be the vice principal and the principal. It has to be somebody who has taught you a subject. The counselor recommendation is the third one that you will be submitting as part of your application portals, and that should come from the school counselor. Only in the event that the school does not have a school counselor, then can you ask the vice principal or the principal to submit that counselor report. All right. And essentially in the counselor report, they are going to be talking about the kind of board of education that is followed at the school. What is the peer group like in the student's class? You know, what is the how rigorous is the curriculum and the program that the students are following in that class. They can talk about the you know, class percentiles, this class ranks they can talk about, and basically give a picture of the school as well as the curriculum. Essentially that is what the counselor report will really be focusing on, whereas the teacher recommendation letters are going to focus upon the on the student's academic ability in that particular subject and the teacher's interaction with that particular student. If it's if you're applying for a graduate program, then it's going to be a rather broad based sort of letter where the professor is going to talk about your intellectual and academic abilities. They're going to talk about whether you have, you know, critical thinking abilities, problem solving abilities, how good you are in that particular subject, what is the depth of knowledge that you have, how you performed in your projects or internships or something, if that is the information they'd like to add about. So, and how they think that you would be the right fit for that particular university in the US that you're applying to. So, it will be little broad based in that sense. All right. Okay. So, basically teachers or professors who have taught you a subject, even for master's students, for graduate students, it is ideal to get it from professors who have taught you a subject. All right. In case you are a working professional, then of course you can get it from somebody who is like a team leader or a project leader or the supervising manager or somebody like that. But if you are a student currently, then ideally get it from teachers or professors who have witnessed your work in your classroom and out of it. That would be more useful. Getting it from the chairman of the university makes no sense, or from the principal of a college makes no sense, because you are one amongst the many thousands who study there and they won't really know you personally very well from an academic point of view. All right. Yes, you have a question.
I'm going to apply for graduation.
Yes.
I'm working in a company.
Yes.
I'm interning at a company.
Yes.
So would it be ideal to get it from my superiors when I'm working?
Okay.
But still I'm a student.
Okay. So, the question from one of the students in the audience is that he is currently doing an internship at an organization and he would like to know whether he can get it from his immediate supervisor in that internship space. Yes, you can. If it is an internship program, a research internship or something like that, you can get it from somebody who is supervising you on that internship, but then make sure that the other two are from professors who are teaching you a course at the college or university where you are currently doing your bachelor's degree. Okay. All right. So, why is this letters of, why are the letters of recommendation so important? Because they do impact your admission chances, one most important. All right. The university admissions committee will give great weightage to the letter of recommendation because they would really like to know how you perform in an academic setting, and who better than your teachers or professors to give them that background about you, right. Okay, sorry, we were here. Yeah. Okay. So, how do you submit the letters of recommendation? Now, if you are a high school student applying for a bachelor's degree and let us say you are using the common application website or a coalition website or whichever portal, application portal that you are using, you will have to get your teachers to go online and upload those school reports and the recommendation letters directly to that common application website. It is not like you can email it to the college, you can't do that. They will have to upload it in that section, which is for the counselors of school counselors will have a section on the common application, and their teachers will have to go sign up and they will have to upload it for the students from their school who are applying to the different universities. As far as the graduate students are concerned, what you will ideally be doing is giving the name and email IDs of your professors in your application form. Once you have submitted the application form, the university will then directly get in touch with your professors and tell them how to submit the letters of recommendation. They will give them instructions on how to go about submitting the letters of recommendation. All right. This is how. So, your recommender, in case of graduate students, they will receive a prompt, or they might receive just an email saying, inviting them to create a profile for themselves on the website of the university, and then responding to a prompt or responding to a question, or it could be just space to provide their recommendation letter about you as a student. Okay. Yes, please.
Do the teachers receive the prompt as soon as they click on the submit button, or after we pay the
both? You will have to, I would suggest you will have to wait for both. My suggestion is you pay the fee immediately once you start filling out the application form itself, so that once you submit the application, they will hear from the universities, from the application portal in your case, from them directly from the university. Yeah. All right. So, in some cases, this is mainly for graduate students. They might have a form with objective type questions where your professors will just have to say yes, no, and then give a narrative description at the end. That could be one way. One could be some universities may allow the professor to even send a physical copy of their recommendation letter to the university, but then you'll have to check for each university what their preferred mode of receiving that letter of recommendation is. But most often than not, it will usually be an email that the professor will receive, and they will be given instructions on whether they should go and create a username and a profile on the university's website and then type it in or upload it, or whether they should be sending it by email or whatever. The instructions will be clearly given to the professor once you've given their names on that. Okay. So, this is like in one university's case, this is what the recommendation letter sample looks like. So, that is for the graduate students essentially. Yeah. In the case of Stanford, so if you go to the university's website, this is again graduate students. So, they have given specifically instructions on how this works, and you should be reading that and sharing that information with your professors so that they have clear understanding of how this is to be done. Yeah. And in some universities where they will allow you to send a physical copy, you can get it in your letterhead, college or school letterhead, and you can submit that. But that is not the case for most schools. It will have to be done online through the application website that you are using. Right. So, these are tips for you in terms of how you choose your recommender. All right. Choose somebody who has known you at least for a year and whose subjects you have enjoyed and excelled in, because somebody who can speak for your abilities in that particular subject that they are teaching you, that is very important. Identify somebody who may know you both inside and outside of the classroom. Now, inside the classroom, it's obvious they've taught you a course, but outside, especially in schools, they would have been the house teacher, or they might be in charge of certain activities or events in school programs on the annual day, or somebody who's you have worked with closely in some school project or a science project, or it could be an annual day event or a sports day event, and you've had opportunities to interact with some of your teachers, subject teachers in the outside the classroom context. Identify those teachers, because they would have seen your personality in and outside of the class. So, they will be able to better speak about your potential in and outside the class. They will speak about your not just your academic ability, but they can talk about your interpersonal relationship skills, your communication skills, your team working skills. They could speak about all that also, and that will really benefit when they have a good understanding of who the student is. Sometimes your teachers may already know about some of the universities that you might be applying to, and if they do, then it's great, but if they don't, that's when you should write a small profile about each university that you're applying to and share it with your teacher. Tell them that it's a very competitive university. This is the kind of profile of students that they admit each year in their university. So, give a little capsule or a profile of each university that you're applying to your teachers who are going to, or professors who are going to write the recommendation letter for you. Because if they're not familiar with the US university landscape, and if they're not familiar with the names of these universities, they need to know how detailed their letter should be, because if it's going to be a very competitive university you're applying to, it can't be a very generic letter. It'll be complete disservice to your application if it's going to be a very generic kind of letter. It has to go into details and provide justification for why they believe you're the right student for that university. So, give that little profile to your professors or teachers. That will help them when they're writing, right. Also, always pick a recommender who can make a favorable comparison between you and your peers. That's also important. Of course, ask someone with good written communication skills, it always helps, all right. Okay. So, ideally you should provide the following material to your recommenders so that they have a complete picture of who you are before they start writing this letter of recommendation for you. So, share your academic records with them. If you have a short resume, please submit that, because it gives them a lot of information about you which they might not know otherwise outside of the classroom interaction that they have had with you. Any specific talents you have, any work experience, internships, projects that you've done, mention all of that and share it with them. If you've already written your statement of purpose for grad students and the essays for the undergrad students, share that also with them, because that gives them an insight into your personality, which will be really good for them to read, and perhaps it will give them a new insight about who you are and speak much better for you, especially with undergrads. That really helps, And of course, as I said, small write up on the competitiveness profile of the universities that you're applying to will also really be very helpful to your teachers. Of course, you must inform if there is a deadline mentioned in the application for them to submit, which is, at least in the case of undergraduates, you might want to go through that section and see if there's anything there that you might want to share with them. Also let them know you do your homework in the application websites and check what is the mode in which the teacher or professor would have to send that letter of recommendation. That information will be there on the university's website, so do look that up. Yeah. And if there is any additional paperwork that they need to complete, make sure you brief them well in advance about that, so that they are not caught unawares and not expecting something. What should go into an effective letter of recommendation? Of course, they must talk about your academic standing in comparison to their peers in the classroom. They must speak to specific strengths of yours, like in research or writing or discussion. Some students might not be very good at getting grades, but they might really have good in-depth knowledge of a subject and may be able to speak about it more than they may be able to write in an exam per se. So if that is definitely a strength, because that really explains that the student has good foundation of the subject, has good knowledge, and has read is deeply well read, and therefore the student can speak well on that particular subject. So if those are some strengths of yours, make sure the teacher highlights them and doesn't just focus on the fact that you had great marks in your transcripts. Let them talk about those additional things about you as well. Tell them to talk about your interests, your motivation, your sense of commitment to what you're doing in classroom, whether you have a sense of curiosity or not, and every time they should give examples for everything they say about you. Right? They might say that has deep intellect, this student has XYZ student has great intellectual capacity, but that's a very general statement. When they say you have great intellectual curiosity or capacity, they must articulate with a specific example or some form of evidence of how they have seen you display that particular characteristic or that particular talent. They must mention that. Okay. And of course, strengths of personal character, you might have great leadership potential, or you might have done excellent work in community service, where the teacher was able to see how you were willing to help people beyond your immediate sphere of focus. Things like that can also be described by the professor or the teacher. It really does add value to your letter of recommendation. And as I said, very important to give examples. I would say not just whenever and wherever possible, everywhere possible, your teachers must consider giving examples. They have to illustrate clearly why they are making a statement about you, and they must illustrate that with specific examples or evidence of some way to highlight that this is how you demonstrated that particular quality or that particular achievement or talent. All right, that's very important. All right, so what should the format of the letter of recommendation really be like? Of course, initially in the LOR, the author or the writer, the recommender will identify themselves and speak about who they are, what is their academic background, and what is their professional qualifications. They can mention that, or experience, or like for example, I am a teacher of English in XYZ high school, and I have been a teacher for so many years, and something like that. So basically go into some details about themselves to identify who they are to the person reading that letter of recommendation. Following that, they can talk about their relationship with you, the student. How long have they known you for? In what context do they know you? Whether, in the sense that have they taught you a subject directly, or have they supervised you on a research program or on a project? So that sort of information that they should, and then their duration and nature of interaction with you is another thing that they should mention in that next paragraph. Then they can go into why they are recommending you, the student, for your admission to the US university. Now, how you have demonstrated a willingness to take intellectual risks, going beyond, let's say, the normal classroom experience. If you have any particular weaknesses, but you have worked hard to overcome those challenges or obstacles, that is definitely a highlight. The teacher can speak about how you have exponentially grown over the course of the year in your academic ability, and they have seen that growth in your learning and your knowledge development, and that's something they can surely talk about. It can be over a course of, let's say, this teacher taught you physics in grade 11 and 12, then the teacher can speak about the growth as a student over the course of the 2 years that they have taught you. So that's again something that will really add to their talking to you about. So all these particular points they can definitely add. So with that, I'm going to stop our presentation, because it's more taking questions from all of you now. These are our contact details. If you I'll leave that on the board, and I'll reiterate on those when we finish with our session. So now I'll open up the discussion for questions. If there are any specific questions, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, word limit ideally not longer than one page, let's say an A4 page, not longer than that, maximum maybe 1,000 words. Actually that would be too much probably. Say there is no specific word limit unless the university specifies that this should be a word limit. I think one page should be good enough. One A4 size page for grad students should be good enough. Ideally, if it is on the college letterhead, even better. But if in case the college doesn't allow your professors to use their letterhead for this purpose, maybe the professor can create their own letterhead on a Word document or something like that and use that to draft your thing. If they are uploading it or if they are sending a physical copy, but if they have to key it in or if they have to respond to specific questions on the university's LOR section, then of course it's a different thing that they'll have to do.
How many would be an ideal?
2 teacher recommendations, 1 counselor report is what usually is required, especially on Common App and many of these websites.
In case of Common App,
I'm sorry, I should repeat that question for my online audience. I forgot to do that. The first question was how many words from the grad student. The question was how many words long should the ideal statement of the letter of recommendation be. So, as I said, 1 page and A4 size 1 page should be ideal. More than that is going to be too long for the. You must remember that professors are, the admissions committee is reviewing thousands of applications. So, keep it short and succinct makes sense. The next question was how many recommendation letters should we get from the school counselor or the school teachers. Most admission application portals will require 1 counselor report and they will require 2 teacher recommendation letters. So, that should be enough. If at all you feel that the student has a particular talent for a subject or a field of like art, for example, or music or something, and it's a phenomenal sort of talent that you'd like to highlight about the student, then you could get a supplementary recommendation letter from somebody outside of the school where the student is going for this activity, let's say. That's something that you can consider giving, but the fewer the better. You must again remember thousands of applications being reviewed. There is only so much time the admissions committee can spend on each application. Yeah? Unless it's so superlative that you must get that additional supplementary letter, I would say stick to the counselor report and 2 teacher recommendations. Yes, please.
in the case of a common application, is it recommended to have one write-up from the teacher and upload to all these colleges?
Yes.
Or is it individually deferred to
No, no, it will be for the portal itself, it will be the same thing that you are uploading, yes, and that will be sent to the different schools. If a school requires any additional, if a university requires any additional letter from a particular student, they will email you and let you know in that case, like they do in the case of supplementary essays or something.
So like you just mentioned art, and my son had art in 9th and 10th. So can the counselor probably, because the teacher is a particular subject teacher, so can the counselor
Can I know what the student is applying for in the,
applying for science actually?
then it won't make
It
sense.
doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, the question was this student had an art teacher in grade 9 and 10 and they want to know whether they can get a recommendation letter from the art teacher. So, my question to the parent was whether the student is going to apply for an art program or is he applying for a science program. If the student is applying for a science program, it is not very relevant to then get it from a 9th and 10th grade art teacher. Unless if the student was applying for a fine arts program or a visual arts or a performing arts program, then I would have said yes, you can still get it from the art teacher in grade 9 and 10.
Mean that the
Yeah.
subject teacher will give the 2 letters.
Yes.
The counselor, his school is like a very small setup. So the principal actually knows what art work they are doing. So can the counselor letter mention those kind of talents?
Yes, that can be done. That can be done. Yeah, sorry.
And the other thing is like he's actually fixed on like say he actually wants to do biochemistry, but he might have more connect with the physics teacher or something. Is it like especially biology and chemistry? he
Okay.
wants to
So, the student might be applying for a biochemistry program, but he might know the physics teacher much better than the chemistry teacher. So, is it okay to get it from the physics teacher? It's fine to get it from the physics teacher, but of course, it will add value if you are able to get it from the chemistry teacher, because it's related to the major that the student wishes to pursue at the university. So, from that perspective, it would be ideal if the student can get it from the chemistry teacher, but if not, then the physics teacher is also fine. Yeah. Any other questions?
I'm pursuing my undergraduation degree in psychology. During the course of my 3rd year, I'll probably be interning in certain places, and I probably suppose that the supervisors who give me internships would have a better idea about my personality and my skills, my adaptiveness basically in various aspects. So will it be more suitable if I got it from my subject teachers who taught me in college? They would have a very theoretical idea of my academic capabilities. Or should I get it from them, or should I maybe get it from my internship supervisors? Which would be more suitable?
Okay, so we have a question from a psychology major undergrad student currently who is going to pursue a master's in the US, and his question is that his college professors might have a very academic theoretical kind of knowledge about his abilities, whereas the person who is supervising him on an internship that he is currently doing might have a better idea about his adeptness in the program and practical knowledge in that program. So whom should he really be getting the letter of recommendation from? So my answer is get 2 from your professors and 1 from your project supervisor or internship supervisor, because you must remember that the purpose of going to the US is to study, and therefore the the number of letters that can talk about your ability in an academic environment, it would have more value for you when you're applying to a university program. So, but do get 1 from your internship supervisor. All right.
Actually, I'm applying for 10 colleges. So, the same person is going to give me the LOs for all 10 colleges. So, you told me that the LO should be college specific, right? Come on, at least a para should be college specific. So, how the changes should be done by that particular professor or my intern, right? How should it be done?
Okay, so the question from a student in the audience is that he is applying for graduate program and he is planning to apply for 10 colleges. So, one must as he understood from my presentation, one must perhaps make it very specific to each university's application. The letter of recommendation should also be specific to that particular university. So, how can that be done? So, ideally a large part of your recommendation letter will remain the same. The professor is not going to change word by word for each college that you are applying to. That is too much work for your professor here as well. But what they should perhaps do is, at least in their concluding paragraph where they are talking about why you are particularly suited for that university, if they can go into details, like for example, if you have provided them enough background about what research work you are intending to pursue in that university or what course you are hoping to pursue, if they have some background information like that, then they will be able to personalize and customize the letter of recommendation. At least one paragraph, the final concluding paragraph, can be customized for each university that you are writing and sending, that they are writing and sending it to. But overall, about you is not going to change. Much of the information that is about you in the letter of recommendation is not really going to change that much, unless they feel that there is something that they would like to highlight about your potential, which relates to the expectation a particular university has from the kind of students they admit. If that is the case, then they can personalize it even to more detail, but otherwise most of the letter would be generic, but certain aspects of it will be customized to the university that you are applying to and the program that you are applying to.
So my son moved from 10th to 11th to a new school. So should the letter of recommendations, all of them should it be from the new school that he is in?
Right. Yeah. So the question is, the student was in one school for grade 9 and 10 and in another school for grade 11 and 12. So should the recommendation letters be sought from teachers from the school where he is currently doing his grade 11 and 12? Yes, ideally yes, because that is the high school, you are already in your higher secondary sort of level, and these are the teachers who are teaching you prior to your application to the university. So ideally yes, it would be best if you could get your 2 letters of recommendation from the 11th and 12th grade teachers. But let us say if there is one teacher who taught him a particular subject in 9th or 10th, let us say a physics teacher or a history teacher, and that is the program he is going to pursue in his undergrad program. And if that teacher knows the student very well and is able to articulate much better the abilities and potential of the student, you could get one from a 9th grade teacher and one from a 12th grade or 9th and 10th grade teacher and one from a 11th and 12th. But ideally it is best if you get it from somebody in a school where he is currently studying. Okay. So the question is, the student is pursuing a bachelor's degree in computer science, but is hoping to switch majors to another field of study in his master's program. So how, in that circumstance, where should I be getting the letter of recommendations? Okay. Now if you had any courses in your undergrad program in CS where you studied business or you had some components of finance, maybe that professor can give you one letter and the other 2 will have to be generic from your computer science professors. or if you have done an internship in the area of computational finance outside of your college work, then maybe you can get one from that place as well. So, that would be the only way to, you know, for them to be able to speak about your potential in that subject, because otherwise all your other professors are only going to be able to talk about your potential in the computer science field. So, this is the only way to go about getting it. So, one from if you've done internships, get one from the internship organization, and if you have anybody who taught you some business or finance courses as part of the overall 4-year CS coursework, then maybe one of those professors could talk about it. Okay.
So would my maths teacher be ideal for this?
Sure, you could get your mathematics teacher, statistics teacher could also speak about it. Yes, you could. Yeah. Okay, we have a few questions from the online audience. One has come from a gentleman who wants to know whether he is eligible at 35 years to study. Well, I am very happy to tell you, Selvaraj, there is no age bar in the US. You could be 80 years old and you could still enroll for a course in a US university. There is no restriction on age when it comes to admissions. The university will look at your overall academic profile when you are applying for a master's or a PhD program. So, that is all that you will have to worry about, and of course, you will have to fulfill their admission eligibility requirements. If they require you to take the GRE exam, or if they require you to take a TOEFL exam, those kind of things that you will have to definitely meet those requirements. But as far as your age is concerned, as I said, there is no restriction on your age, no limit to the age at which you can go and study in the US. Okay, that's the only question from the online audience. If there is anything else from the in-house audience, yes,
So
please.
usually they are actually applying through the Pharma Map, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't, the recommendation letter doesn't have to be specific to any.
No, it can be a very generic, as I said, it will be, the counselor report will be about the school, and the teacher recommendation is about the student's potential in that subject really. So, it will be rather broad based in that sense.
Other than this LOR, there is something called a student record. Is it the same?
No.
About the student record?
No, student record is about the activities the student has been part of, like all their extracurricular activities, community service background and those things. So, it is an opportunity for the student to share what all they have done outside the classroom and at which they excel. So, that is something they will have to input that information into that section.
I think for the counselors,
That is the counselor will do it in their section, where it is their students' talents and community background, service background and all that has to be input. The counselor will do that, but there is also in the student section also there is information where the student has to upload all this information that the student can do, that the student can take care of. Any other questions?
Okay, in a very hypothetical scenario, suppose one of your closest professors chooses to unfortunately leave college just during the last semester of their undergraduation program, and you were hoping to get a good LOR from them. What has happened, because since that professor or teacher is not affiliated with the college anymore directly, how do you get it from them?
Right, that's a very, very good question. If the professor who you had a great interaction and relationship with academically in college has left the college and is no longer teaching there, how can I still get a recommendation letter from that professor? Yes, you can. So, ideally in that introductory paragraph where the professor talks about how they know you and how long they have known you for, in that paragraph the professor can highlight that when they were a teacher at your particular college or university, they were teaching you a particular subject and this is how long they have known you, and they must indicate that they are no longer in service in that particular college, either they have retired or they have moved on to another institution, and they can mention in what position they are serving in the new institution. And following that, they can then go about what they think about your academic potential and your potential to be the right fit for that particular university. But you can very well get a letter from somebody who's even a school teacher. If they've left the school, you can very well get a letter from them, provided they identify and explain that they are no longer in the institution, but they've known that student for a considerable period of time, and in that context they're writing this recommendation letter. All right, there are no more questions online, and just to we'll wrap up the session today, but before that let me just let the online audience as well as our in-house audience know that next week, the first Thursday, 1st of November, we are having a session for grad students essentially. This is admissions, I mean undergrad students could also come and seek some of their, get answers to some of the queries, but the program is titled Admissions to Competitive STEM Programs at US Universities, and we have a very distinguished Fulbright scholar. His name is Dr. Razi Nalim. He is a professor and associate dean at the School of Engineering and Technology at Indiana University, Purdue University. So he will be giving this talk on Thursday, which is 1st of November, and the talk is scheduled from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So for those of you looking for admission to STEM programs, do make sure that you attend the event, and you will have a wonderful opportunity to interact with Dr. Nalim and to talk to him about applying to not just his university, but to other STEM programs in the US. So do make sure that you attend our program on 1st of November. So with that announcement, we'll come to the end of today's session. Thank you all again for joining us online, and to our in-house audience for joining us today.